Early in the morning of March 12, 2011, the Lululemon store in Bethesda, Maryland was about to open. The manager arrived at the front door, ready to open the shop for the day, when she noticed that the door had been left unlocked. Looking through the windows, she realized this wasn't just a situation where an employee had failed to lock up the previous night. Clothing had been torn off the racks and thrown across the shop floor, and some of the mannequins had been knocked over. Now believing that there had been a break-in, the manager approached a nearby man and asked him to look inside. The man followed the trail of bloody footprints to a hallway out the back, where he saw a woman lying face down in a pool of her own blood. It was Jana Murray, one of the store's employees. It was clear that she had been the victim of some kind of violent attack and had died several hours before. Another employee, Brittany Norwood, was located in the bathroom, lying on the floor. Her face was covered in blood, and somebody had tied her wrists and ankles with zip ties. When the police arrived on the scene, they were able to speak with Brittany and find out more details about what happened. She told them that she and Jana had been rostered on a closing shift the previous night. The two women had closed up like they usually would, but after they left, Brittany realized that she had left her wallet inside the store. She called Jana, who had the keys, and asked to be let back inside. The store's alarm system records confirmed the timeline, showing that the door had been unlocked again just after 10 p.m. Shortly after the door was unlocked, Brittany told the police that two unidentified men wearing ski masks had followed her and Jana back inside the store. The men quickly overpowered the two women, violently attacking and then sexually assaulting both of them. For investigators, there were some things about Brittany's story that just didn't make sense. Jana's injuries were consistent with the kind of vicious attack that Brittany had described. She had received more than 330 wounds on her body, which had come from a minimum of 5 weapons. Police couldn't think of any reason why a pair of violent attackers would carry out such a brutal attack on one employee, while leaving the other one with only a few cuts and bruises. Despite Brittany's insistence that she and Jana had been raped by the men, there was no forensic evidence suggesting that either of them had been sexually assaulted. The only sign that rape had taken place was a hole that had been deliberately cut into Jana's pants, as if somebody had been trying to make the police believe that the crime had been sexually motivated. Even though there were a significant number of bloody footprints inside the store, none of them led to any of the store's exits. In fact, there was no sign that the attackers had left the store at all. Even more strangely, while one of the bloody footprints had come from a pair of men's sneakers, which had been taken off and abandoned inside the store, the other set of footprints weren't made with men's shoes. In fact, the other footprints belonged to one of the victims, Brittany Norwood. Investigators searched for anybody who had been close to the Lululemon store that night, hoping that a witness would be able to confirm whether the two masked assailants had even existed. They spoke to 2 employees at the neighboring Apple store who had heard a loud argument coming from inside the Lululemon store at around the same time the supposed attack had taken place. However, both the employee and the manager insisted that they had not heard any male voices. In fact, the altercation had sounded like it was between 2 women. One of the women had been saying, quote, "Talk to me, don't do this, talk to me, what's going on?" Then there had been the sounds of screaming and loud banging noises, which sounded as if someone was being hit. After that, a quieter voice said, "God help me. Please help me." At the time, the Apple store manager hadn't thought the argument was anything serious, believing it was, quote, "just drama." In the early hours of the investigation, the police had been treating Brittany as if she were one of the victims of the attack. But the more information they discovered, the more they began to believe that she was not a victim at all. When Brittany had been found, she had been lying on the bathroom floor, supposedly drifting in and out of consciousness since the attack. She didn't have any serious head injuries that could have led to her losing consciousness. In fact, the one wound that was found on her forehead suggested her story was a lie. A forensic expert analyzed the pattern of the blood from the forehead cut, confirming that it had dripped downwards in a straight line, showing that Brittany had actually spent most of the night standing or sitting up instead of lying on the floor. The police located Jana's car, which was parked 3 blocks away outside of a farmer's market. They found a significant amount of blood inside the car, which belonged to 2 people, Jana and Brittany. Because Jana's injuries were so severe, it was impossible for her to have driven the car after the attack. The only person who could have left the blood inside the car was Brittany. When she was confronted with this evidence, Brittany eventually told the police that she had been forced to move Jana's car by the 2 attackers, who had told her that if she didn't return to the store within 10 minutes, she would be killed. This was just another detail which didn't make any sense to the investigators. Why would the attackers insist on Jana's car being moved? And if they wanted it to be moved, why didn't one of them leave the store and drive it? Brittany didn't have any answers, and she also didn't have a credible explanation for returning to the store after she had been sent to move the car. She told the police that she was too scared to make a run for it because she knew that the 2 men knew where she lived. She believed that if she had just driven Jana's car to safety, the men would have hunted her down and killed her. 1 week after Jana's death, Brittany Norwood was arrested for her co-worker's murder. The masked men who had broken into the store had never existed. Instead, Jana had died after a petty argument with Brittany. Before leaving the store that evening, Brittany and Jana had followed the usual security procedures at the store, including both women checking the other one's bag for any Lululemon merchandise. While searching Brittany's bag, Jana found a pair of Lululemon pants which had not been paid for. Believing that her coworker was trying to steal the pants, Jana placed a phone call to the manager, who said that she'd deal with the potential theft the following day. Then Jana received a phone call from Brittany, asking her to unlock the store so that she could go back in and get her wallet. Jana agreed, and when she arrived at the store, Brittany attacked her, using a hammer, a knife, a metal bar, box cutters, and a wrench to inflict hundreds of injuries. She hit Jana in the head so hard that her spine was broken and her skull was shattered. Once Jana was dead, Brittany then decided to stage the crime scene, hoping that the police would believe Jana had been killed in a robbery. She put on a men's size 14 sneakers to leave blood trails around the store, threw clothing and cleaning supplies around the store, and knocked over the mannequins to make it appear as if the store had been ransacked. Finally, Brittany tried to make herself look like a victim, but she couldn't quite bring herself to injure herself as extensively as she'd injured Jana. Instead, she used a knife to cut her own forehead and then used zip ties to bind her wrists and ankles. On the 27th of January 2012, Brittany was found guilty of her co-worker's murder and sentenced to life in prison. It only took the jury 21 minutes to make their decision. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe. I'm the host, and I really appreciate you listening. If you're brand new to 10-Minute Murder, super happy that you're here. Make yourself comfortable, and more importantly, hit subscribe wherever you are listening right now. That's going to more easily help you catch up on all of the back episodes. Connect with me on social media, and you can see the pictures of what we talk about here on the podcast. It's not gross and graphic stuff, but it's interesting to see the places and the people's faces that are involved in what you hear about here on the podcast. So go to anywhere you want to follow this podcast, type in 10-Minute Murder, and it'll pop up. Or you can use the links that are in the show notes of this episode. And hey, if you ever want to do something that helps 10-Minute Murder grow, you can simply tell your friends, your family, anyone that you think could be into brief true crime stories like this about 10-Minute Murder. For all things related to the podcast, go to 10minutemurder.com. All right. Email question for today. Hello, Mr. Joe. I kind of like being called Mr. Joe. That makes me feel important. This is Sydney in LA. I have a question I'm curious about. What court case do you think gets attention but for the wrong reasons? Hi, Sydney. Thanks for the email. This is a tough one, and I had to think about this a little bit. And since you didn't specify a murder case, this is my answer. Okay, so we all know the story about the lady that sued McDonald's because her coffee was too hot. If someone mentions about how people just sue anyone for anything, This case usually gets mentioned in some derogatory way. Let me tell you, her lawsuit is so legitimate. I've done research on this that no one asked me to do. The coffee was being served at like 190 degrees. The spill caused third-degree burns, and it was so hot that it fused parts of her female area together. She required skin grafting. She was in the hospital for 8 days for spilled coffee. She initially asked for $20,000 to cover medical expenses. McDonald's said, no, we're not going to do that. So they went to court, and the jury awarded her $160,000 in compensatory damages to cover medicals, lost wages, then another $2.7 million in punitive damages. Now, that was later reduced, and then they even ended up settling for an undisclosed figure. But my point is, so many people have absolutely trashed this lady over the years about suing for stupid things. That's not the case in this situation. Many more people would have absolutely been hurt for years to come if they hadn't been forced to change the temperature that they serve their coffee. And that's it. Thanks for listening to another 10-Minute Murder podcast episode. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.